The night was dark, and the city lights flickered like dying stars. In the shadows of the marketplace, a secret auction was about to begin. It was not a place for the weak. It was a place where laws did not exist, and money was the only rule. Smugglers, mercenaries, and strangers gathered in silence, their eyes glowing with greed. Among them was a human traveler named Daniel. He had come only to watch, not to buy. He told himself this again and again, but something deep inside whispered that tonight would not be ordinary. Daniel had heard rumors of the black market, a place where forbidden things were sold, rare alien weapons, strange creatures, and sometimes even living beings. He never believed the stories until now. The air smelled of smoke and metal. The stage was lit by dim red lamps, and the auctioneer, a tall alien with silver skin, raised his hands for silence. One by one, strange items were brought forward. An energy blade that hummed with power, a vial of glowing liquid said to cure any wound, and a necklace made from the teeth of a beast no one dared to name. Each item sold quickly, each price higher than the last. Daniel sat in the back trying to stay invisible. He had no interest in owning illegal things. But then the auctioneer spoke again, his voice sharp and cold. "Next we have something truly rare," he announced. "An alien girl, captured far from here. A beauty unlike any other. Trained for loyalty. Sold as a love slave." The crowd shifted with excitement. Whispers filled the hall. Greedy eyes searched the stage. And then she was brought out. She walked slowly, her wrists bound by glowing chains. Her hair was long and silver, falling over her face. Her skin shone faintly under the red lights, marked with strange symbols that looked ancient. Her eyes, however, were the most shocking part. They were not the eyes of a slave. They were eyes of fire, filled with hate and sorrow. She stared at the crowd as if memorizing every face. She stared as if she wanted revenge. Daniel felt his chest tighten. Something about her was wrong. Something about her was powerful. He whispered to himself, "Don't get involved, walk away, she's not your problem." The bidding began, voices rose, numbers shouted, hands lifted. The auctioneer smiled as the price grew higher. Daniel sat frozen, yet his heart pounded louder with each bid. He didn't know why, but he felt as if the girl's eyes were locked only on him. Every time another bidder shouted, her gaze turned back to him, as if asking silently, "Why are you not helping me?" Daniel's throat went dry. His hand moved without his mind. He raised it, and the auctioneer pointed toward him. "One more bid from the human." The crowd laughed, thinking a fool had joined the game, but Daniel's voice shook as he confirmed his bid, and then silence. No one else spoke. No one else raised their hand. The alien auctioneer slammed his staff down. "Sold to the human traveler." Daniel blinked in shock. He had not meant to win. He had not meant to buy. But it was too late. The girl was pushed toward him, her chains glowing brighter for a moment before fading into nothing. She stood before him, quiet, her eyes still burning. Daniel tried to speak, but no words came. The girl looked at him, her lips barely moving. "You don't know what you've done," she whispered, her voice soft but filled with warning. Chills ran down his spine. The crowd was already moving, on the auctioneer calling for the next item, but Daniel could not hear. All he could hear was her voice repeating in his mind, "You don't know what you've done." He looked at her again, and in that moment he realized something terrifying. She was not afraid of being bought, she was afraid for him, and the fire in her eyes promised one thing. This was not the end. This was only the beginning. The ship hummed softly as it left the black market behind. Daniel sat in the pilot's seat, staring at the stars ahead, but his thoughts were not on the journey. They were on the girl, sitting quietly in the shadows of the cabin. She had not spoken since the auction. Her silver hair covered part of her face, her hands resting on her knees. She looked calm. But Daniel felt anything but calm. He still could not believe what had happened. One moment he was only watching, and the next, he had bought an alien slave. He cleared his throat, trying to break the silence. "You're free now," he said, softly, not looking directly at her. "You don't have to stay with me." But she did not move. She did not even blink. She just stared at him with those burning eyes. It was as if she was studying him, waiting. Daniel felt his skin crawl under her gaze. He stood and walked closer, holding out his hand to help her. "Stand." "You can go," he repeated. "You don't owe me anything." Finally, she tilted her head, her voice like a whisper of steel. "I am not leaving," she said. The words struck Daniel harder than he expected. "Not leaving? Why? You're free," he argued. Her eyes flashed, and for the first time he noticed the faint glow of the strange symbols on her skin. "You freed me from them," she said slowly. "But now I choose." She paused, her gaze sharp as a blade. "And I choose to stay with you." Daniel's heart raced. This made no sense. Why would she stay with a stranger who knew nothing about her? He wanted to argue again, but something in her tone told him it would be useless. Hours passed. The silence grew heavier. Every time Daniel looked over, she was watching him. Not with fear, not with kindness, but with a strange, unreadable intensity. He tried to ignore it, tried to focus on the stars outside, but the weight of her presence never left him. That night, as Daniel rested in his bunk, he heard soft footsteps. He opened his eyes slowly, his hand moving toward the blaster under his pillow. The girl was standing at the doorway, her figure outlined by the faint light of the ship. "What do you want?" Daniel asked, his voice sharp. She tilted her head again, as if trying to understand his fear. "I do not sleep," she whispered. "I will watch," Daniel frowned. "Watch what?" "Watch you," she said simply, as if it was the most natural answer. Her tone was not threatening, but it was not comforting either. Daniel lay back, staring at the ceiling, his grip still on the blaster. He didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, he noticed something strange. The ship's systems were running smoother than usual. The navigation glitches were gone, the engines sounded stronger. He frowned and checked the logs, but there was no sign of repair. When he looked at the girl, she was sitting cross-legged on the floor, her eyes closed, glowing faintly. Her skin, symbols pulsed like a heartbeat. Daniel realized with a chill that it was her. She was somehow linked to the ship. He walked closer, his voice careful. "Are you fixing my ship?" Her eyes opened, sharp and glowing. "I am protecting," she replied. Daniel froze. "Protecting? From what?" She looked past him as if staring through the walls into the endless dark of space. "From them," she whispered. Before Daniel could ask more, alarms blared, a warning flashed on the control panel. 2 ships had appeared on the scanner, fast and armed. Daniel cursed, rushing to the pilot's seat. "How did they find me so quickly?" he muttered. But when he glanced back, the girl was already standing, her eyes brighter than ever. "They are not here for you," she said coldly. "They are here for me." Daniel's stomach dropped. Of course, he thought. Of course this was bigger than him. By buying her, he had stepped into something he didn't understand. The girl moved closer, standing right behind his chair, her presence almost electric. "You will not fight alone," she said, her voice steady. Her chains were gone, but Daniel realized something terrifying. It was not freedom that bound her to him now. It was choice. As the enemy ships closed in, Daniel's hands tightened on the controls, but deep down he knew something. This girl was not just a passenger. She was a storm, and that storm had chosen him. The scanners beeped louder. The enemy, ships ready to attack. Daniel glanced at her one last time. "Who are you?" he demanded, her lips curved into the faintest, sharpest smile. "You will find out," she whispered. And then the ship shook with the first strike. The ship shook violently as enemy fire rattled the hull. Daniel gripped the controls, forcing the craft into sharp turns, his heart pounding like a drum. The 2 enemy ships chased without mercy, lasers slicing through the black sky. Alarms screamed, warning of damage, warning of death. The girl stood behind him, perfectly still, her silver hair flowing with the ship's vibrations. She did not flinch. She did not fear. Her glowing eyes tracked every blast of energy as if she already knew where it would land. Finally, she spoke, her voice calm but sharp. "You cannot outrun them, not alone." Daniel gritted his teeth. Then help me. She placed her hand on the wall of the ship and suddenly the lights flickered. The engine roared with new life far beyond its limits. Daniel's eyes widened as the ship surged forward with unnatural speed. The controls felt different, almost alive under his hands. "What are you doing?" he shouted, her gaze locked on him, burning like fire. "Awakening what was sleeping," she answered. The ship twisted sharply, moving faster than Daniel thought possible. One enemy vessel overshot, and he fired back, striking its wing. The other kept close, but the girl raised her hand, and for a moment Daniel swore he saw the enemy's weapons flicker out as if jammed by invisible force. The enemy ship faltered, giving Daniel a chance to pull away. When the battle ended, one enemy craft drifted in flames and the other limped back into the void. Daniel collapsed in his chair, sweat dripping down his face. His ship had survived, but not because of him. He turned to her, his voice low and trembling. "What are you?" For the first time she moved closer, her chains gone but her presence heavier than iron. "I am not a slave," she said, her voice filled with something ancient. "I was never meant to be one." Daniel frowned, his hand tightening on the armrest. "Then what are you meant to be?" Her eyes glowed brighter, the markings on her skin pulsing with rhythm. "A weapon," she whispered. "A weapon made by my people, the last of my kind." Her words filled the cabin like thunder. Daniel stared, unable to breathe for a moment. He had not bought a helpless girl. He had bought the galaxy's most dangerous secret. She sat across from him, her movements graceful, controlled. "My people were feared," she continued, "because we could bind with machines, bend them, make them obey." She touched the ship's console lightly, and it hummed in response. "That is why they hunted us, captured us, sold us." Her gaze sharpened. "That is why they will never—" "Stop!" Daniel ran a hand through his hair, his stomach sinking. "So when I bought you, you became their target," she finished, her tone steady. Daniel let out a bitter laugh. "Great, just what I needed." But deep down, he knew the truth. He had seen her power, and part of him was terrified. Not just of her, but of what the galaxy would do to take her back. The girl leaned forward slightly, her voice softer now. "You freed me from chains," she said. "But freedom is not safe. Freedom has a cost." Daniel met her gaze, struggling to understand. "What cost?" Her lips curved into something, between a smile and sorrow. "Your life," she whispered. The words sank into him like knives. He stood quickly, anger flaring. "So what? I'm just supposed to accept that? That I'm doomed because of you?" But she shook her head slowly, her eyes steady. "No," she said. "You are not doomed. Not if you stand with me." Silence filled the cabin, broken only by the hum of the engine. Daniel paced back and forth, his mind racing. He wanted to run, to drop her at the next station and leave her behind. But something deep inside told him it was already too late. He had seen the fire in her eyes, and a strange part of him knew walking away was no longer possible. That night Daniel could not sleep. He dreamed of glowing chains, of endless chases through the stars, of whispers calling his name. When he woke, the girl was sitting silently near the console, still watching, still waiting. Her glowing marks flickered faintly in the darkness. Daniel sat up, his voice rough. "Tell me your name." She tilted her head, studying him. "My name was taken when they captured me," she said, "but you may call me Ceres." Daniel whispered the name to himself, and it felt heavy, powerful. Ceres, the last of her kind, the weapon the galaxy wanted. And somehow she had chosen him. But before he could speak again, alarms blared. Another warning, another ship detected, this one larger, faster, deadlier. Ceres stood slowly, her glowing eyes locked on the screen. "They have found us again," she said, her voice low but unshaken. Daniel clenched his fists, his chest tight with fear. "How many more will come?" Ceres turned her gaze to him, her expression unreadable. "As many As it takes, she whispered, until one of us is gone. The stars outside glimmered coldly as the warning sirens wailed through Daniel's ship. This time, the enemy was not just a pair of hunters in small crafts. A massive ship emerged from the darkness, its black armor gleaming, its weapons already, glowing with deadly light. It was not chasing, it was hunting. Daniel's hands tightened on the controls, but his heart was racing too fast to think clearly. Sarah stood beside him, calm as ever, her silver hair falling around her glowing eyes. Her gaze was fixed on the approaching ship, not with fear, but with grim recognition. "They know who I am now," she whispered, "and they will not stop until they take me." Daniel's throat went dry. He wanted to scream at her, to demand answers, to tell her this was her problem and not his. But he couldn't, because deep inside, he already knew it was too late to walk away. The hunter ship fired first, a beam of energy cutting across space, missing Daniel's vessel by only inches. The shockwave rocked the cabin, throwing Daniel against the console. He cursed, forcing the ship into a roll, engines screaming as they dodged another blast. "They're too strong," Daniel muttered, his hands shaking. But Saris placed her hand on his arm, steadying him. "You are not alone," she said firmly. "We fight together." The ship trembled as more blasts rained down, each one closer than the last. Daniel's mind screamed at him to run, but Saris's presence anchored him. She moved to the center of the cabin, kneeling. As her glowing marks began to burn brighter, the lights flickered, the ship hummed, and suddenly Daniel felt it again. His vessel was alive, moving with her will. He pulled sharply on the controls, but it felt as if the ship already knew what he wanted. Together, they dove under the hunter's barrage, sliding through the shadows of space like a predator. Daniel fired back, hitting the enemy's shields, sparks scattering across the black void. But the hunter ship was not alone. Two smaller escort crafts appeared from behind, closing in like wolves. Daniel swore under his breath, sweat dripping down his face. "They'll tear us apart." Saris's eyes snapped open, glowing like twin suns. "Not if I tear them first," she said coldly, her hand stretched toward the console, and Daniel felt a surge of raw energy blast through the ship. The nearest escort craft froze mid-flight, its engines flickering violently. A second later, it exploded in a silent flash of light, debris scattering into the endless dark. Daniel's jaw dropped. You just killed them without firing a shot." Saris's voice was flat without triumph. "They would have killed you." The second escort craft broke formation, circling fast, its weapons locked on Daniel's hull. Before Daniel could react, Saris moved again, her glowing marks pulsing with rhythm. The enemy ship's weapons suddenly jammed, sparks bursting from its cannons. Daniel seized the chance, firing his blasters and shredding the craft into nothing. But the main hunter ship still loomed, unshaken by the loss of its escorts. It powered forward, its massive cannons charging for a killing blow. Daniel's stomach twisted. He knew one hit would destroy them. "Saris, we can't win against that thing," he shouted, panic rising. Saris turned her gaze toward him, and for the first time her voice trembled. Not with fear, but with something deeper. "Then we do not fight to win," she whispered. "We fight to survive." The hunter's cannon fired, a blinding beam of energy rushing straight for them. Daniel yanked the ship hard, but the blast clipped the wing, sending alarms screaming, the hull tearing with sparks. Smoke filled the cabin, warning lights flashing red. Daniel coughed, fighting to keep the ship steady. "We can't take another hit." Saris moved closer, her glowing skin casting strange shadows across the walls. She pressed her hand against the damaged panel, her energy pouring into the broken circuits. Slowly, the alarms faded. The systems flickered back to life. Daniel stared, in disbelief. "You're keeping the ship alive." Saris's lips tightened. "I am keeping you alive." For the first time, Daniel saw something in her eyes beyond fire, a strange softness hidden beneath steel. But there was no time to think. The hunter ship was charging again, preparing its weapons for a final strike. Daniel felt his chest tighten, his mind racing for a plan. But Saris spoke first, her voice low and steady. "There is one way." Daniel turned, desperate. "What way?" Sarah stood taller, her glow brightening until the cabin was filled with blinding light. "If I unleash my full power, I can destroy them," she said, "but it will bind me to you completely." Daniel froze, the words heavy in the air. "What does that mean?" "Bind you." "To me?" Sarah's gaze locked onto his, her voice sharp as a blade. "It means your fate will no longer be yours alone." Outside, the hunter ship's cannon charged again, brighter, deadlier, unstoppable. Inside, Daniel's heart thundered, torn between terror and something he could not yet name. And in that moment, he realized the truth. The galaxy was not just hunting Cirrus anymore, it was hunting both of them. The silence after the battle was heavy. Daniel's ship drifted in the cold void, its hull scarred and smoking but still alive. Daniel sat slumped in the pilot's seat, his hands trembling as the adrenaline faded. He should have been celebrating survival, but all he could think about were her words, "Bind me to you completely." The phrase echoed in his head, haunting, confusing, terrifying. What had she meant by it? What would it cost? Sarah stood in the middle of the cabin, her silver hair glowing faintly in the flickering lights. Her markings still pulsed with a soft light like a heart that refused to stop. She did not look tired, though Daniel knew she had carried the ship through fire and death. She looked calm, almost too calm. "You saved us," Daniel said finally, his voice rough. Her burning eyes turned to him, but her face remained unreadable. "I saved you," she corrected softly. "The ship was only a tool." Daniel swallowed hard. Pushing himself to his feet, he wanted to argue, wanted to remind her that he had fought too, that he had not been useless. But when he looked into her eyes, all his words vanished, because deep down, he knew the truth. Without her, he would already be dead. That night, as the ship floated in quiet darkness, Daniel tried to repair what he could. His tools clattered against broken panels, sparks jumping from wires. Every time something failed to work, his frustration grew. Finally, Sarah stepped closer, her hand brushing the console. The systems lit up, alive once more. Daniel sighed, dropping his tool. "You make me feel useless, you know that?" Sarah tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "You are not useless," she said simply. "You are alive, and that is enough." Her words struck him deeper than he expected. For a moment he almost laughed, but the sound caught in his throat. Because she wasn't joking, she truly believed it. Over the next days, something strange began to happen. The silence between them was no longer heavy. It was something else, something alive. Daniel would find her watching the stars through the window, her expression softer when she thought he wasn't looking. Sometimes he caught her tracing the strange marks on her skin as if remembering something she had lost, and once, just once, he saw her smile, a tiny flicker of light when he burned their dinner trying to cook. It was gone in a heartbeat, but it was real. They began to talk more, though her words were always careful. She told him fragments of her story, how her people were created as weapons but longed for freedom, how they could bond with machines, turning ships into living things, how the galaxy feared them, hunted them, and sold the survivors into slavery. When Daniel asked how many of her kind still lived, her eyes turned distant. "None," she whispered. "I am the last." Daniel felt his chest tighten at her words. He had thought himself alone, too, wandering from world to world with no family, no ties. But her loneliness was heavier, sharper, the last of her kind, carrying the weight of an entire race on her shoulders. For the first time, he saw not just fire in her eyes, but pain. Pain so deep it had never healed. And yet, despite the pain, she stayed with him. Despite her freedom, she never left. Daniel began to wonder, was she protecting him because she had to, or because she wanted to? One evening, as the ship floated, near a quiet star, Daniel sat in silence, watching her from across the cabin. She was meditating, her glowing marks flickering in rhythm. Finally, he asked the question that had been burning in him since the auction. "Why me?" Her eyes opened slowly and she studied him for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than he had ever heard. "Because you did not see me as a weapon or a slave," she said. "You saw me as me." Daniel's heart skipped. He wanted to deny it, to claim he hadn't done anything special, but the truth was, in her eyes, she had chosen him, and not by accident. For the first time, Daniel realized the bond between them was no longer just survival. It was something deeper, something fragile and dangerous, but danger was never far away. The quiet moment ended when the ship's scanners beeped. Another signal, faint but growing stronger. Daniel cursed under his breath, rushing to the console. "They found us again," he muttered. Sarah stood, her eyes narrowing. "They will always find us," she said, her voice colder now. "Because I am with you." Daniel turned to her, anger flashing. "Then maybe I should leave you. Maybe that's the only way I survive." The words left his mouth before he could stop them. Silence fell, heavier than before. Sarah stared at him, her eyes glowing brighter. But there was something else in them. Hurt. Without a word, she turned and walked to the far corner of the cabin, her back to him. Daniel felt his chest tighten with regret, but the words could not be taken back. The scanner beeped louder, the enemy ship drawing closer. Daniel's hands shook as he grabbed the controls. He glanced back at Saris, but she did not move. Her silence was worse than any storm, and Daniel realized with a cold chill that he had broken something fragile. Outside, the enemy ship closed in, its weapons glowing like a rising sun. Inside, Daniel's heart pounded, torn between survival and the bond he was slowly beginning to understand. And in that moment he wondered, would she still fight for him after what he had said? Or had he just pushed away the only ally he had left in the galaxy? The cabin was silent, except for the steady hum of the ship. Daniel's words still hung, in the air like a blade, sharp and cruel. "Maybe I should leave you." He wished he could pull the words back, swallow them, erase them, but they had already been spoken. Sarah stood with her back to him, her silver hair shimmering faintly in the dim light. Her glowing marks pulsed slowly, like a fading heartbeat. She did not speak, and her silence was heavier than any argument. Daniel gripped the controls, trying to focus on the enemy ship drawing closer, but his hands shook. He had fought mercenaries, smugglers, hunters, but this, hurting her, felt worse than any battle wound. The scanner beeped louder, warning of danger. "Saris," Daniel called, his voice strained. "I didn't mean it." Still she did not turn. He swallowed, forcing the words out. "I'm just scared, that's all. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to protect you, or me." Finally, she moved, slowly turning to face him. Her eyes glowed faintly, but her expression was unreadable. "You cannot protect me," she said softly. "That is the truth, Daniel, and it frightens you." Her words cut deeper than his own had. Daniel clenched his fists, shame burning in his chest. She stepped closer, her gaze sharp. "But you can choose," she whispered. "That is what makes you different from them. You can choose who you are and who you stand with." The ship shuddered as the enemy vessel locked onto their position. Daniel cursed, pulling the controls sharply, but Saris placed her hand on the console. The ship steadied instantly, as if responding to her will more than his. Her eyes narrowed as she stared at the glowing screen. "They want me," she said, her voice cold. "They always will, but now they will also want you because you carry me with you." Daniel's chest tightened. He thought of his old life, wandering from planet to planet, no one to miss him, no one to follow him. Now the galaxy's deadliest hunters were on his trail because of her. His first instinct screamed to cut ties, to save himself, but another voice whispered louder, the voice that remembered her pain, her loneliness, her fire. "Saris," Daniel said, his voice low but steady now. "If I set you free, truly free, what would you do?" She tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "I would stay," she said simply. "Not because I must, but because I choose." Her glowing eyes locked onto his, unblinking. "You think I am your burden, but I tell you this. You are mine now, Daniel, and I will not let you go." His heart skipped. The weight of her words pressed on him like gravity, heavy but unshakable. He wanted to deny it, to push her away again. But he couldn't. Because deep down, part of him didn't want to. The enemy ship fired, and the blast rocked the cabin. Sparks flying from the panels, Daniel snapped back to the moment, his mind racing. They could not win like this. Not against endless hunters. "Saris," he said quickly, "you said something before, about binding yourself fully. What does it mean?" Her eyes flashed with fire. "It means my power will flow through you and yours through me," she said. "Our lives will be tied, our fates one. Neither can exist without the other." Daniel's throat tightened. "And if I say no?" Her voice was calm, but her eyes burned. "Then I will still fight for you until I fall." The ship shook again as another blast struck the hull, alarms screaming. Daniel's mind spun, the choice tearing him apart. Bind himself to her and risk losing his freedom forever, or refuse and watch her burn out fighting for him. It was not just survival anymore, it was trust. It was surrender. He stared at her, sweat dripping down his face. "Why me?" he demanded. "Why not wait for someone stronger, someone smarter, someone who knows what they're doing?" Sarah stepped closer, so close he could feel the strange warmth radiating from her glowing skin. "Because you are not like them," she whispered. "You see me, not as a weapon, not as a slave, but as something more." Her words sank into him like fire. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, his chest heavy, his thoughts racing. When he opened them again, his decision was clear. "Do it," he said, his voice shaking but firm. "Bind yourself to me, let's end this together." For the first time, Sarah smiled. Not cruel, not distant, but real. She placed her hand over his chest, her marks blazing with light. The ship trembled. The air hummed with raw energy. "Daniel," gasped as warmth surged through him, his heartbeat matching the rhythm of her glowing symbols. He felt the ship as if it were his own body, every circuit, every engine, every spark alive within him, and he felt her, Saris, her strength, her fire, her pain, all flowing into him. Outside, the enemy ship charged its weapons for one final strike. Inside, Daniel and Saris stood bound. Together, their fate sealed. For the first time, Daniel did not feel like a passenger in his own story. For the first time, he felt ready to fight. Saris's voice echoed in his mind, soft but unshakable. "Now, Daniel," she whispered, "let us show them what it means to be hunted." The light spread through the cabin like fire. Daniel gasped as Saris's power flowed into him. Every nerve burned, every heartbeat thundered, yet he did not collapse. Instead, he stood taller, stronger, as if part of her had become part of him. The ship around them no longer felt like cold metal. It felt alive, pulsing with energy like veins carrying blood. Daniel's hands hovered over the controls, but he no longer needed them. He felt the engines, the weapons, the shield. He was the ship. Saris's glowing eyes locked on his, and for a moment, the galaxy outside faded away. "You are not alone anymore," she whispered, her voice echoing both in the air and inside his mind. Daniel nodded, the fear in his chest replaced with something else. Resolve. Outside, the Hunter vessel loomed, its massive cannons glowing with deadly light. It fired, but this time Daniel moved with Saris, not as two, but as one. The ship twisted sharply, the beam missing by inches. Daniel grinned despite the danger. He had never flown like this before. It was as if the stars themselves bent to his will. Saris raised her hand and Daniel felt power surge through the weapons. They fired together, a storm of light slamming into the Hunter's shields. The enemy ship staggered, sparks scattering across its black hull. For the first time, the Predator looked wounded. But the fight was not over. Dozens of smaller Hunter crafts spilled from the larger ship, swarming like angry insects. Daniel's chest tightened, but Saris's voice whispered in his mind, calm and steady. "Do not fear them, they fear us." Together they dove into the swarm. The ship spun and twisted, blasting through enemy lines. Each movement was perfect, every strike guided by both Daniel's instincts and Saris's power. Enemy ships exploded in flashes of fire one after another. But still more came. Waves upon waves, Daniel's body ached under the strain. The bond burning like fire in his veins, he gritted his teeth, pushing harder. "Saris, I don't know how long I can—" "You can," she interrupted firmly, her eyes blazing. "Because I am with you." The words gave him strength. He surged forward, weaving through enemy fire, striking back with precision. For every shot they dodged, another ship fell. The void lit up with the wreckage of their enemies. Finally, the swarm broke apart. Only the massive hunter ship remained. Its cannons charged again, brighter than ever. Daniel's heart pounded. Even with their bond, even with their power, one hit could destroy them. "We can't just dodge forever," he muttered. Saris's voice filled his mind, steady and unshaken. "Then we do not dodge, we strike." Together, they focused, their combined will flowing into the ship. The weapons glowed hotter, brighter, until the panels shook from the force. Daniel screamed as they unleashed everything, a blinding wave of energy that cut across the void. It slammed into the hunters' shields, cracking them like glass. The enemy ship staggered, its cannons faltering. Daniel's chest heaved, sweat pouring down his face. Did we do it?" But Saris shook her head, her expression grim. "Not yet," she whispered. "They are not beaten." The hunter ship roared to life, engines burning hotter, weapons glowing once more. It was wounded, but far from destroyed. Daniel felt his strength slipping, his body trembling under the bond. Saris placed her hand over his, steadying him. "One last strike," she said, her voice sharp, "but it will take everything." Daniel met her eyes, and in that moment, he understood. This fight was not just about survival. It was about choice, about standing for something bigger. He nodded slowly, his voice raw but steady. "Then let's finish it." They closed their eyes, their power merging fully. The ship screamed as it charged, energy flooding through every circuit, every weapon, every bolt the hunter's cannon fired. A massive beam of light rushing toward them. But Daniel and Saris fired too, unleashing their final strike. The two blasts collided in the void, light swallowing the darkness. For a moment, it felt like the universe itself would tear apart. Then, silence. When the light cleared, the hunter ship was gone, torn apart in a silent explosion that faded into nothing. Daniel's ship drifted through the wreckage, broken but still alive. Inside, Daniel collapsed into the seat, his chest heaving, his vision blurry. Beside him, Saris stood, her glow fading slightly, her breath uneven, but her eyes still burned, steady and fierce. They had survived. Together, they had destroyed the hunters. But Daniel knew this was not the end. If one ship had come, more would follow. The galaxy would not forget what had just happened. He turned to Saris, his voice hoarse. "What happens now?" Saris looked at him for a long moment, then spoke softly. "Now, Daniel, they will hunt us across every star because they know what we are together." Daniel's heart pounded, but instead of fear, he felt something new. Hope. Saris placed her hand over his once more, her voice calm but unshakable. "They will learn, the galaxy will learn, that we are not prey," she whispered, her burning eyes locked onto his. "We are the storm." The ship drifted into the endless dark, two souls bound as one, and somewhere beyond the stars more hunters stirred, preparing to chase. But Daniel was no longer afraid because now he had made his choice, and together with Saris, he would face whatever came.